Combat Infantry, West Front, 1944-1945. This is a block war game by Columbia Games, and if you watch my videos, you probably know that I really like block war games. That is just the way that I like very much to handle games about conflict, because the blocks allow you to record a lot of information simply by changing the orientation. They create fog of war, just the mechanics that I like very much. Also, I like games by Columbia Games. I liked most of their games in the past, so when this game showed up, I was pretty excited and my hopes were pretty high. I also like games about World War II, so everything seems to be perfect here. One thing that is unusual in this game, though, for a block war game, is the scale. Block war games tend to represent the action at a larger scale than this game does. This game is very tactical. It represents small units, it represents rifle squads. Sometimes the illustration that you see on the block, especially when the unit has taken a couple of hits, almost represents exactly the number of people that are there. Usually blocks in block war games tend to represent larger formations, so this was unusual. It doesn't have to be bad, but it doesn't have to be good either. We need to evaluate the game, and then we'll talk about that. So this is a block war game. It represents chain of command in a simple but effective way. That is, units are organized in combat headquarters, and so you will activate your headquarters, and then the headquarters in turn will activate units belonging to that group. The presence of headquarters also allows the game to be solitaire friendly, which is not possible for all block war games. Some games of this kind just don't work that way because of the fog of war that you get to lose. Here the fog of war is represented by the fact that if you're playing the game solo, you dump the headquarters in a cup or in another opaque container, then you draw them, and that draw them randomly, and that determines the random activation of the various headquarters. At that point, you place the headquarter on the map within range of one of the units that it could activate, so when the headquarter disappears from the map, that abstracts the fact that the headquarter is relocating, and then you activate the units controlled by that headquarter normally. That way you don't know the order in which units are going to activate, and that creates surprises and unpredictability and makes the game, again, playable for somebody who is playing both sides at the best of their possibilities and still wants to see some surprises. As for combat units themselves, there is a lot of information on these blocks, more than you find in most block war games by Columbia. Here we have an indication of the group that the unit belongs to, nice illustration, the morale. Then the number here is the number of strength points that the unit has. The unit usually stands on the board facing the owning player, and you rotate the unit by one click to decrease the number of strength points each time the unit takes a hit. Also, you rotate it the other way each time that the unit recovers a strength point by rallying, for example. And this is interesting because, again, like in many block war games, the unit faces the owning player for most of the time, so the other player only sees the back, knows where your units are, but not exactly what they are or how strong they are. The unit is revealed when attacking. The unit also has another state, which is when you effectively rallied. Actually, when you attempt a rally, whether you're effective or not, then the unit is placed face down and cannot activate again for that turn. There are also different rules about when units are revealed. In particular, armored vehicles are revealed more easily than other combat units, to represent the fact that in World War II, heck, if a group of people, if an enemy squad was hiding in the bushes, then you really didn't know that they were there, or you couldn't make an assessment about them until the fire started. As for armored vehicles, veteran infantry could tell which vehicle was which simply by the noise of the engine, and that makes it easier for the opponent to identify what they are. So armored vehicles are revealed more often than infantry. As for other information here we have the firepower, that is the target number. A unit to score a hit will roll a number of dice equal to their strength points, so 3 dice, and this is the case, and will score a hit for each number that is rolled, which is equal to or lower than the firepower. The small number under the firepower is range. And this game also uses 10-sided dice, just for disclosure, not all games do that. So units will be on the board within stacking limits, following the instructions of the scenario. I'm putting blocks randomly there is probably not correct in terms of headquarters and stuff, or anything really. So units will be placed on the map, and they will try to pursue the objectives of the scenario. Now, also speaking of maps, I probably should have done that before I started setting up a scenario. The game comes with 2 maps. Ooh, look at this little bit of magic here. 2 cardboard maps. They lay down pretty flat. You probably don't need to place them under a piece of plexiglass. They both show an intricate net of rivers, canals, towns. They're not terribly different from one another. I guess that is the nature of the terrain of the confrontation. But again, from the point of view of gameplay, they're not incredibly different. They play very similar to one another. You have, however, a good range, a good variety of scenarios that come with the game. Now, as during the game turn, the players will activate their commands, and the commands will activate combat units. A unit that activates can take 1 action for each activation. It can rally, that is, roll a die and try to recover a point that the unit may have lost. It may move up to its movement allowance. Did I show movement? Probably not. There's so much information here. This is movement. Move, based, of course, the expenditure of movement points is based on terrain and other modifiers like that, but basically terrain indicates how many movement points you spend. Or you can choose to fire. You can choose to fire up to your range, and if you have line of sight, and fire is resolved pretty much the way that I explained. Roll dice equal to the strength of the unit, score a hit for each result that you roll that is equal to or lower than your firepower. The terrain of the defender may of course protect the defender, may reduce the number of hits. Another thing, as a function of movement, at the end of movement, if you entered an area that contains blocks of the opponent, then you start an assault. An assault is, well, pretty much 3 rounds of combat. The defender goes first in each round of combat. The defender goes first and can fire or retreat. Then the attacker can do the same, and then we go back. Attacker, defender. However, in these 3 rounds of combat, maybe less if one of the sides retreats and or is annihilated before the end of the combat. But if it gets to the end of the 3rd round of combat, in the 3rd round of assault combat, the attacker cannot fire, must retreat. So effectively that means that the defender may fire up to 3 times, 1 in each round of assault combat, and the attacker only 2 times, as the 3rd round must be used for retreat. In defense, in assault combat also, you do not take modifiers into account such as terrain or armor. Again, more little things that emerge here. Armor value, armor vehicles have it. It is indicated here, and the armor value is subtracted from the firepower of the opponent. That means that in many cases, units firing against a vehicle, an armored vehicle, will have their firepower reduced to 0 or less than 0, which means they cannot fire effectively, and that's why you need assault, because then in assault you do not take armor into account. Other things, you may perform special actions such as digging foxholes, laying smoke, just blowing up bridges, that sort of thing. But that is pretty much how the game works. As you can see, the general structure is pretty simple. It pretty much means activate a headquarter, that headquarter activates combat units, they perform 1 action, which is fire or move and possibly assault, do a special action, possibly rally, and you continue like this until one of the players has met their victory conditions, which will change depending on the scenario. Very simple, very basic core rules. It does have more complexity that comes out of these rules and gives sometimes the game a little more of a puzzle quality, because of the fairly involved terrain effects charts, especially when it comes to stacking limits and next site limits, how many units can fire, and assault. So sometimes you are doing some fairly Byzantine maneuvers and calculations to be able that your units can fire as much as possible. You can create a wide front of fire, so precisely to be able to go past these limits. Then you want to attack from many axes at the same time, which feels both thematic and not that thematic at the same time for some reason. It feels thematic, yeah, of course, if I'm attacking from 3 directions, that is good for me. But sometimes the maneuvers that I do to do so, they feel a little artificial, a little stiff. So there is complexity that emerges from here that you have to take that into account, and then of course you have a lot of special units that will break rules one way or the other. So the core rules is very simple, but you have a lot of things. Engineers have a bonus when attacking in assault, other units have a bonus against other people, other units can do this or can do that, etc., etc. So air support, artillery support, and so on and so forth. A lot of small little rules, but not too many, not to the point that the basic core of rules, the simplicity of the basic mechanics is overwhelmed by it. I would say it's enriched. It has that a little bit of nuance. Also, you may just start the game with those basic rules, so with pretty much the rules that I told you, not many more, and then you add other stuff. And there is nothing that prevents you from having a small firefight between just rifle squads, and then you add armor, and then you add artillery, and then you add engineers, and so on and so forth. So if you feel that the game is overwhelming, which is not, but still, then you can simply simplify the scenarios, create your own scenarios, which is also very simple to do. So in general, this is a pretty good game, one that definitely is open, is accessible to neophytes of the wargaming hobby. Even if you haven't played many war games before, maybe even if you haven't played any war game, this is one that you could definitely be able to pick up and enjoy without too much struggle. If you are a veteran wargamer, this is not a game that just works as an introduction, but there's a game that definitely has enough subtleties, enough challenges for the seasoned wargamer too. There's a variety of scenarios, and again, if you don't like a scenario, if you don't like any of the scenarios that come with the game, creating your own scenarios, if you are a seasoned wargamer, will be extremely simple. Maybe I would have liked a little more variety with the maps, maybe more maps, and maybe there will be expansions that will come out. But I have to say, in general, I like this game, and I went past my initial skepticism about the scale. It feels like Conflict of Heroes, the block war games, and I searched my feelings and I discovered that I have nothing against that. It just works. So it's very simple, very linear, but then when you add all of the extra units, all the special units that break rules and give special opportunities and nuances to your strategy, then the game definitely has enough meat to keep you entertained, even if you're looking for something a little more sophisticated. In general, this game fits within the philosophy of Columbia games, which is one that I like very much. Pretty much, it has the same philosophy of the games that I like very much, because I like the philosophy to start with, which is rule books that are very short, usually with Columbia games are between 8 and 12 pages. Simple ideas and a lot of hard wiring that has been done with the blocks, with the terrain, with the scenarios, so that you concentrate on doing the best that you can do with your units, rather than remembering a long laundry list of rules and forgetting most of them and then having to replay turns or whatever. So simple games with more strategy, with more challenges, with more interesting decisions in them than you would imagine at first. Within that philosophy, this game, at least if nothing else for the number of factors that you have to take into account that are printed on the blocks, is a little, just an ounce more complex than other entry-level war games by Columbia. But not much. I'm saying this just to be thorough, but other than that, it's pretty much within that range, within the level of complexity that we have known from Columbia games and that we have liked in the past, and I think we can like here. definitely this is a game that I enjoyed. It can be enjoyed by a variety of players at any level of familiarity with wargaming. Combat Infantry Western 44-45, a good game and a good new system, and one that I'm definitely curious to see where we'll go next. I think we can apply it to North Africa, we can apply it to the East Front, maybe we can apply it with the Pacific, actually, with the block game, with its fog of war. The block system could really work well in the jungles of the Pacific. So let's see where it goes. For now, this first installment in what I hope is the Combat Infantry series is one that I found convincing, playable, and really fun.